What if the most dangerous person you've ever met is the only one who can save you? She didn't see it coming. Nobody does. One hallway, one cold shoulder brushing hers, one impossible, fleeting touch. And something in her blood stirred. Like a secret her own body had been keeping for 18 years. She was a poor girl from nowhere, walking into an elite school built for the children of the powerful. He was cold, untouchable, beautiful the way a storm is beautiful, something you admire from a distance, if you're smart. She was not keeping her distance. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the boy who had just grazed her arm and kept walking without a single word was 327 years old, that his gray eyes had turned, just for a fraction of a second, the color of blood, and that her veins carried something so rare, so dangerous, that entire clans had gone to war over it. She thought she was just starting over. She had no idea she had just walked into the center of a war that had been waiting for her blood, for longer than she had been alive. Her name was Lila Evergreen, 18 years old, brown hair, deep blue eyes, a second-hand coat she'd worn through 2 winters. She and her mother, Evelyn, a quiet artist with paint-stained hands, had just moved into a narrow apartment in Manhattan, the kind where you can hear your neighbor's television through the walls. Evelyn had found work, painting commissioned portraits for a wealthy and reclusive lord, a man named Aldrich Ravencroft, whose name seemed to make the landlord go just slightly pale when he said it. Lila didn't think much of that. Not yet. What she was thinking about, as she shouldered her worn canvas bag and stepped out into the October morning, was survival. Because the school she was about to walk into, Ravenwood Elite Academy, was not built for girls like her. It was built for the children of billionaires, of senators, of people whose last names opened doors that most people never even knew existed. The iron gates alone cost more than her mother would earn in a year. Before she left the apartment, Lila did one small, quiet thing that no one saw. She set her brother's photograph on the windowsill, facing the city, not the wall, so that if light came through in the afternoon, it would fall across his face. "I'll be careful," she murmured. "I promised, didn't I?" 2 years earlier, she had watched her brother, strong, laughing, reckless, collapse on the floor of their kitchen, eyes burning red, veins darkening beneath his skin. A substance someone had given him, something called crimson venom. He had looked up at her in his last clear moment and whispered the words she still carried like a stone in her chest. "Don't trust the serum." She had never driven as fast as she had that night, racing to the hospital. She had still been too late. Ravenwood's hallways smelled like expensive cologne and quiet power. Serafina Voss, all silk and sharp smiles, swept Lila immediately into her orbit, pressed a school map into her hands, whispered the unspoken social rules like a favor that came with invisible strings. "Stay near me," Serafina murmured, "and you'll be fine." Lila almost believed her. Then the hallway shifted. Students parted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but the way a current moves around a stone. And he was there. Black hair, gray eyes that caught the light and gave nothing back. A face so still it looked carved from something colder than marble. His shoulder brushed hers as he passed. He stopped, just for one breath. His nostrils flared, almost imperceptibly. And then those gray eyes dropped, slowly, deliberately, to the side of her throat. "Stay away from Lucien." Serafina's voice came low and urgent beside her. "He's not normal." Lila almost laughed. She'd pushed motorcycles past their limits at 2 in the morning. She'd held her dying brother's hand. She didn't frighten easily. But something was already wrong. Because his skin, where it had grazed her arm, had been ice cold. And her heart was beating like she'd just crossed a finish line. But she had no idea that everything was about to change. A poor girl had just entered an elite school, and somewhere down that marble hallway, the most dangerous vampire king in the city already knew exactly who she was. If Lila were your granddaughter, would you tell her to run from Lucian or trust him? Drop a yes or no below. I read every single one. The morning after her first day, Lila told herself one thing: stay invisible. Keep your head down. Go home. She had survived worse than a school full of wealthy students who looked through her like glass. She had survived grief. She had survived 2 years of holding herself together so her mother wouldn't fall apart completely. Ravenwood was nothing. She almost believed that. Right up until the moment she sat down on a stone bench in the school garden with a cup of terrible vending machine coffee. And someone sat down beside her. You argued with Professor Hale yesterday, said the voice, about the Keats poem. And you were right. She looked up. The boy beside her was lean, quietly handsome, warm brown eyes, the kind of face that had never tried to intimidate anyone in its life. He held out a second cup. The good kind, still steaming, from somewhere beyond the school gates. Theo Harlan, he said. I'm nobody important, which in this school is actually a relief. Lila looked at the coffee for a long moment. Don't get comfortable. Don't let people in. You know what happens. She took the cup anyway. Lila Evergreen, she said, such a small thing. 2 quiet people finding the same corner of a world that didn't quite fit either of them. But something in her chest shifted, barely perceptibly, like a door that had been bolted shut for 2 years, creaking just slightly on its hinges. Between second and third period, in a stretch of corridor where everyone else had already gone to class, Lucian Ravencroft stepped out of a doorway and blocked her path. Not aggressively, not theatrically. He simply appeared, and the hallway, which had felt ordinary a second before, suddenly felt too small. You're in my seat, he said, flat, final. I'm in the seat the teacher assigned me. Then the teacher made a mistake. She looked at him for a long moment. The black hair, the gray eyes, the impossible stillness of someone who had never once been told no and believed it. She felt it again, that cold pull, the way the air around him seemed thinner, like standing at the edge of something very high up. I've faced worse things than you, she said quietly. Move. Something shifted behind those gray eyes. Not anger, something closer to surprise, as though no one had said that to him in a very long time. He stepped aside, but as she passed, his voice came low behind her, almost too quiet to catch. You smell like something I haven't encountered in 100 years. She didn't turn around, but her hands, when she sat down at her desk, were not entirely steady. What kind of person says something like that? What kind of person means it? For a poor girl at an elite school, she was learning fast. The rules here were not the ones she had been taught. She hadn't planned on babysitting that evening, but her mother had mentioned, almost offhandedly, paint-stained fingers gesturing vaguely, that Lord Ravencroft's household needed someone to watch the youngest boy. The pay was generous. The apartment needed the rent. Lila said yes before she registered the last name. Finn Ravencroft was 8 years old, gap-toothed, and completely impossible to stay guarded around. He found her sitting stiffly on the edge of a grand sofa and handed her a crayon. Draw something, he said, like an order. I don't draw. Everybody draws. He settled beside her, entirely unbothered. I'll show you. So she drew, badly, a crooked horse that looked more like a melting chair. And Finn laughed, a real laugh, bright and unguarded. Something in Lila's chest did something it hadn't done in 2 years. She laughed too. Later, while Finn showed her his own drawings, dragons, castles, a family portrait where everyone was slightly too tall, he said, without looking up, "Lucian's my half-brother. Different moms." A pause, crayon hovering. He's not mean. He just doesn't know how to not be alone. Lila went very still. He doesn't know how to not be alone. She understood that, more than she wanted to. She wore the red dress because Serafina insisted, and because some stubborn part of her wanted, just once, to not be the girl in the second-hand coat. The Crimson Veil Arena was underground, loud, charged with energy that made your pulse quicken before you understood why. And then Lucian stepped into the ring. What happened next was not a fight. It was something controlled and terrible, the way a controlled demolition is still. At its core, an act of destruction. He moved like the rules of physics were suggestions he'd chosen not to follow. When his opponent went down and the crowd surged, his eyes found Lila's across the room. They were not gray anymore. For one suspended second, they were red, burning, ancient. That's exactly how my brother's eyes looked. Right before. She found the syringe near the fighter's exit. Unmarked. Familiar. Her fingers went cold around it. 2 years collapsed into 1 second. Her brother's voice, barely a thread. "Don't trust the serum." She was still holding it when Lucian appeared beside her. "What are you doing back here?" His voice was rough, unsteady. She held up the syringe. His jaw tightened. Something raw moved across his face and was quickly buried. "That's none of your concern," he said. "My brother died because of this," she said. "So yes, it is." The silence between them was full of things unspoken. Of 2 people who had both learned too young what it meant to lose something they couldn't get back. He reached out, not to take the syringe, but to close her fingers around it so no one else could see what she was holding. "Keep it," he said quietly, "and stay away from Victor Crow." Later, he walked her to the corner of the street in silence. The city moved around them, indifferent and bright. At the curb, the arrogance was entirely gone from his face. What remained was something she recognized, though she had never expected to see it in him. Loneliness. "Don't," she told herself. "Don't you dare feel sorry for him." But she already did, just when she thought she could trust again. The past returned, because the next morning, a man she had never seen before was standing outside her apartment building, watching the window where her brother's photograph faced the city, and smiling. Lucian just showed her something real. For 1 second, the mask slipped. Do you think a person can truly change? Or is darkness always waiting underneath? Tell me in 2 or 3 words in the comments. She almost convinced herself she had imagined him. The man standing below the window. Well-dressed, perfectly still, smiling up at the photograph of her dead brother. Like he recognized it. Like he had been waiting for her to notice him by the time Lila grabbed her keys and ran downstairs. The street was empty. Just the October wind. And a city that didn't notice one more strange thing. She stood on the pavement for a long moment, heartbeat loud in her ears, the syringe still in her jacket pocket, cold metal against her ribs. Stay away from Victor Crow. That was what Lucian had said. Not, "There's nothing to worry about." He had said a name, which meant the danger already had a face. She went back upstairs. She did not move her brother's photograph from the window. She refused to, but she locked the door twice. The next 2 days at Ravenwood felt like walking through fog. Everything bright on the surface, everything wrong underneath. Theo brought her coffee again. She drank it, said thank you, felt guilty for the warmth of it, because every time she looked at him, his steady kindness only made her more aware of what she felt whenever Lucien was near. A pull that had no business being there, that she could not reason away no matter how hard she tried. You can't want both things, she told herself. Safety and the storm. Pick one. She was still arguing with herself on day 4 when she arrived at the Ravencroft house to watch Finn, and found the door already open. Inside, in a room she hadn't been shown before. Voices, low and hard. She should have walked away. Some doors, she had learned, open into things you cannot unsee. She looked anyway. Victor Crow was tall, silver-haired, dressed like a man who had never once been told he couldn't have something. He stood behind Lucien with the easy authority of someone long accustomed to control. One hand resting on his shoulder, the other holding a syringe. The clan expects performance, Victor said softly. Not a request, a verdict. Lucian's jaw was tight. His hands, perfectly still at his sides, had gone white at the knuckles. One more fight, Victor continued. That's all, and then the political arrangement proceeds as planned. I said no. You said no last time too. Victor smiled. Patient. Absolute. The same smile Lila had seen from the street below her window. And yet, he pressed the syringe into Lucien's arm. What happened next would stay with Lila for the rest of her life. Lucian's body seized. Not violently, but silently. Worse than violently. Like a man drowning somewhere no one could see. His jaw locked. His eyes blazed red. Then gray. Then red again. His breath came in slow, controlled waves that cost him everything to maintain. That's exactly how my brother looked. The same eyes. The same terrible stillness of someone fighting something from the inside. She pressed her hand over her mouth, stepped back, and the floor creaked. Just once. Victor's head turned toward the doorway, sharp, unhurried. The precision of something that never needed to hurry. She ran. She made it to the garden before her legs stopped cooperating. She sat on the cold stone bench and stared at her hands. The syringe was still in her pocket. She could feel its weight. The garden was very quiet. Light from the house fell across the dead autumn grass in long gold rectangles. Somewhere inside, a small boy was drawing dragons and castles and a family portrait where everyone was too tall. He's not mean. He just doesn't know how to not be alone. She thought of her brother, of the kitchen floor, of the way time had moved strangely that night. Too fast and too slow at once. The way it does when something permanent is happening and you know it, and cannot stop it. She thought of Lucien's hands, white-knuckled, shaking, refusing to surrender even while his body betrayed him. He's been living like this for how long? The answer arrived before she was ready. Since he was 12, Finn had said once, quietly, while coloring. Victor's been there since Lucian was 12. She closed her eyes. Not weeks, not years. Centuries. He found her there, not with footsteps. She simply felt the air change, temperature dropping 2 degrees. The particular silence that preceded him like a warning. He sat beside her on the bench. Not close, not far, for a long time. Neither of them spoke. You saw, he said finally. Not a question. Yes. She let the silence hold for a moment. Then she spoke. My brother didn't choose it either. Someone gave it to him. Someone who smiled the same way Victor smiles. He was 17, laughing at breakfast, and gone by midnight. Her voice held, barely. I've carried that syringe in my pocket because I didn't know what else to do with the thing that took him. Tonight, I watched it happen to someone else. She felt, rather than saw, him turn toward her. The silence that followed was different. Not empty, but full. The way silence is when two people are standing at the edge of the same wound and realizing, for the first time, they are not standing there alone. I'm not human, Lucian said quietly. I know. What I am could hurt you. Not because I want to, because of what runs in your blood. A pause. Eternal blood, Victor told me tonight. He recognized it the moment you walked into that hallway. He stopped because of me. From the very first second. That's why he was watching your apartment, Lucian continued. He wants to use your blood as leverage, and he will use everyone you love to reach it. Lila looked at him. Past the armor, past the cold, past the centuries, to the person underneath. The one who had been controlled since childhood, and was still, somehow, fighting back. She reached into her pocket, took out the syringe, set it on the bench between them. Then we have a problem, she said, and I don't think either of us can solve it alone. His gaze moved from the syringe to her face. Something in him shifted, old and slow. The way something long frozen begins, tentatively, to thaw. He reached out and covered her hand with his, ice cold against her warmth. She did not pull away. And in that moment, she realized the terrible truth. She wasn't afraid of what he was. She wasn't afraid of his nature, or the centuries of darkness he carried like a second skin. She was afraid of losing him, and that, above everything, was the most dangerous thing she had ever felt. Lucien has been trapped in this darkness since he was 12 years old. Do you think what Victor did to him counts as love, or the worst kind of control? 2 or 3 words. Tell me what you feel. It came the way the worst things always do. Not loudly, not with warning, just a phone screen lighting up in a quiet classroom, and the sound of whispering spreading through the room, like smoke through a cracked door. Serafina had sent the photos at 6 in the morning, timed to land before first period, before anyone had their guard up. Edited carefully. Lila in the red dress, standing close to Lucian, his eyes caught mid-moment in that unmistakable red. Framing chosen to make proximity look like recklessness, to make Lila look exactly like the thing Serafina had always needed her to be. A cautionary tale about a poor girl who forgot her place at an elite school. By the time Lila walked through Ravenwood's front doors, the story was already written. She saw it in the way people looked, or didn't. The quick glances, the murmuring that stopped a half-second too late, and she saw it in Theo's face. He was standing by her locker, holding a printed copy of one of the photos with both hands, like something he didn't know how to put down. Theo, I'm not angry, he said. His voice was very careful, the way voices get when anger is precisely what's being held back. I just want to understand. But you are, she thought, and you have every right to be. The full truth. Lucian's nature, Victor's threats, the syringe, the clan, was not something she could hand him in a hallway. Not yet. Not without unraveling everything. So she said the only honest thing she had left. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. It wasn't enough. They both knew it. He nodded once, a small, careful motion, and walked away. Lila watched him go, and felt the particular grief of hurting someone who had done nothing to deserve it. Victor came that evening, not to the school, to the apartment. Her apartment. The one with the thin walls and the photograph on the windowsill. Evelyn opened the door. Because Evelyn always opened the door. She believed, stubbornly and against all available evidence, in the fundamental decency of people who knocked. Lila came home to find him sitting at their kitchen table. He had brought flowers. "Your mother is a remarkable painter," he said pleasantly, as though this were a social call. His eyes moved to Lila, unhurried, proprietary. The way someone looks at something they've already decided belongs to them. "She captures things most people cannot see. A rare gift." He paused. "Rather like yours." Evelyn stood at the counter, paint-stained hands clasped. Lila could see, in the set of her mother's shoulders, in the way she was very carefully not making eye contact. That Evelyn knew, had known, perhaps for longer than Lila had been alive. "This world isn't only light," her mother had whispered once, weeks ago. "A different life." "You're going to leave," Victor said, turning back to Lila. His tone was pleasant, generous even. "You and your mother, tonight, and the boy will be free of this distraction." He said it like a kindness. Lila looked at the windowsill, at her brother's photograph, still facing the city, October light falling across his face. Don't trust the serum. She had carried those words for 2 years, and sitting across from the man whose smile matched the one worn by the person who had destroyed her family, she finally understood what Daniel had truly meant. Not just the substance. Don't trust the people who offer it like salvation. Don't trust the ones who smile while they take everything. She stood up. She didn't run. That was the thing she would remember afterward. The thing that surprised her most about herself. She had spent 2 years running. From the kitchen floor, from the grief, from the school of wealthy strangers, from the cold-eyed boy in the hallway who carried centuries of darkness, and somehow made her heart do things it had no business doing. From every feeling that threatened to cost her something. She was done. "Get out of my home," she said. Victor's smile didn't waver. "Lila?" "My brother's name was Daniel." Her voice was steady. "He was 17 years old. He spent his last breath warning me about people like you." She took one step forward. "So I'm going to say this once. Get out." Something moved behind Victor's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but the quiet recalibration of a man who had underestimated something. He stood, smoothed his jacket, gave one final smile that promised this was not over. And then he left. The door closed. Evelyn crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around her daughter, paint-stained hands pressing into Lila's back. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then her mother said quietly, "He'll come back." "I know," Lila said. "Then what do we do?" Lila looked at the photograph, at Daniel, frozen and smiling, facing the city that had taken him. She thought of Lucien on the garden bench, ice cold, white-knuckled, still fighting. She thought of Finn's crayon drawings, of Theo's careful anger, of Seraphina's timed, weaponized betrayal. She thought of the syringe on the kitchen table. She picked it up, set it down again, not as a threat, but as a decision. This ends here. Not with grief, not with hiding, with choosing to fight. For the first time in 2 years. For the first time since a kitchen floor and a dying brother and a life that had seemed entirely beyond repair. She knew exactly what she had to do. She picked up her phone and called Lucien. Lila stood her ground against the most dangerous man she'd ever faced. Alone. in her own kitchen. Have you ever had to protect someone you love by facing something terrifying head-on? Just yes or no in the comments. I'll read every single one. He arrived in 11 minutes. She hadn't timed it. But she counted anyway. Because counting was something to do with her hands while Evelyn made tea neither of them would drink. And the syringe sat on the kitchen table between two women who had both been keeping secrets for too long. In different ways, for different reasons. Both of them trying to protect the same person. The knock at the door was soft, measured. 2 knocks. A pause. Like he wasn't sure. Nothing like Victor's knock, which had carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew you had no choice but to answer. Lucien stood in the doorway in the October dark, coat still on, all the careful coldness stripped away. He looked like someone who had driven here as fast as he could and was now standing very still. Because he wasn't sure he was allowed to come inside. Because nobody had ever taught him how to ask for that. Just to arrive and take up space, or leave entirely. Nothing in between. Lila stepped back from the door. He came in. It took until midnight for everything to surface. Not in the cinematic way she might have imagined. Not in a single confession or a revelation that changed the shape of everything in one breath. It happened the way real things happen. In pieces. Around a kitchen table. With cold tea going colder. The overhead light a little too bright. Evelyn sitting with her hands folded. Lucien sitting across from them both. His eyes fixed on the syringe like he was deciding something. Victor's crimes, laid out plainly, were worse than Lila had understood. The controlled substance supply, running through fight circuits across 3 cities. The arranged matches, boys who didn't choose the ring, who were put there. The political arrangement engineered to consolidate clan power across bloodlines, with Lucien as the instrument. Never the architect, never the one who decided. 300 years of being told that his own nature was a liability to be managed, a problem to be controlled. By someone else. Always by someone else. He found Daniel, Lucien said. When Lila finally asked the question she had been carrying for 2 years like something too heavy to set down. Your brother. Victor approached him because of your blood mine. Daniel refused. His jaw moved. Tight. He was given the venom anyway. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. As a warning to your family. The kitchen was very silent. A warning. My brother died as a warning. Something in her chest cracked open. Not grief. She already knew the shape of grief. Had worn it for 2 years like a second coat. Something older. The particular sorrow of understanding. Finally. Completely. That none of it had been fate. Not an accident. Not bad luck or wrong place or wrong time. It had been a choice. Someone's deliberate choice. And she had been living inside the consequences of it ever since, without knowing. Evelyn reached across the table. Paint-stained. Warm. Steady. And covered Lila's hand with hers. I've known for a long time, her mother said softly. I painted them. The vampire world. Because I needed to understand what Daniel had walked into. Knowledge felt like the only thing I could still give him. After. She exhaled. I kept it from you because you were still grieving. And grief needs time. It needs to become strong enough to hold the truth before the truth arrives. Why didn't you tell me? Evelyn's eyes were gentle, the way they always were. Even when what they held was not gentle at all. Because you were still becoming someone who could receive it. You are now. They went together, the 3 of them, to the Night Shadow Clan's gathering before dawn, when the city was at its quietest. That hour where the night crowd has gone home and the day crowd hasn't arrived yet, and the streets belong briefly to no one. Lucien had called it his right, as Vampire King, to demand a full assembly. His voice, when he used it with authority, was something different than anything Lila had heard before. Not loud, never loud, but final. The way gravity is final. The way certain things simply end. Victor's crimes were presented not with drama, but with evidence. Documented. Witnessed. Each piece placed carefully. Undeniable. The clan, which had operated on fear for decades, heard truth in a language it had almost forgotten. Victor was taken into custody by a combined force of hunters and clan representatives. He went quietly. Men like Victor always know. In the end, when a game is truly over, they simply shift. Begin calculating the next one. And then Lucien stood before his people. He had brought the vials himself. Every one. Gathered from Victor's private stores, arranged in a case he set on the ground in front of the assembled clan. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at them. Gray eyes, steady hands, breathing evenly. The way you breathe when you are about to do something you have been waiting a very long time to do. Then he raised his foot and brought it down. Glass shattered across the stone floor under red light. A clean sound, definitive, the kind that echoes. No speech, no declaration, no moment crafted for anyone's benefit. Just the sound of 3 centuries of someone else's control breaking apart at his feet. In the silence that followed, Lila heard Finn, standing to her left, entirely unbothered by being awake at 4 in the morning, wearing his coat on backwards. Whisper, "He did it." She put her arm around the small boy's shoulders, felt him lean into her just slightly. The casual trust of it. He did. Theo came to find her the next afternoon. She was in the school garden. Their bench. The one where everything had started with a cup of coffee and a Keats argument. A lifetime ago. She heard him coming, because Theo had always been the kind of person who announced himself, who gave you time to prepare for his arrival. One of his better qualities. She had never told him that. He sat beside her. No coffee this time. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't. I let jealousy make me careless," he said. Not making excuses, just stating it. Clean. I gave someone with bad intentions exactly the opening they needed. I won't do that again. He looked at his hands for a moment, then up. "I'm not in love with you. I thought I was, but I think what I actually felt was relief. That someone like you existed in a place like this." A pause. Something settling in him. "It turns out that's called friendship, which is actually what I needed, more than the other thing." Lila was quiet for a moment. "That's not nothing," she said. "No," he agreed. His smile, for the first time in days, reached all the way to his eyes. Warm, steady, genuinely his. "Whatever happens next, don't stop being kind. That's the thing worth keeping." She thought of Daniel, of her mother's paint-stained hands, of a small boy handing her a crayon and saying, with absolute certainty, "Everybody draws." "I won't," she said. The garden was very still. A thin November sun came through the trees at a low angle, falling across the cold stone bench and the dead grass and 2 people who had chosen, with clear eyes, to be gentle with each other. Not because it was easy, but because they understood now what it cost not to be. The apartment felt different now. Not lighter. Life doesn't become light simply because you finally understand it. But more honest. The weight distributed properly at last. Carried not by one person alone, but shared, each holding a piece. That, Lila was learning, was what healing actually looked like. Not the absence of grief, just the presence of people willing to help you carry it. Theo chose friendship over jealousy, and it cost him something real. Do you think letting go like that is a sign of strength, or one of the hardest things a person can do? Drop your answer below. I read every word. 3 weeks after Victor Crow was taken, Lila moved the photograph, not away from the window. She would never move it away from the window. The afternoon light still fell across Daniel's face the way she had always arranged it. She still said good morning to him before she faced the city. In the quiet before her mother woke up. In that particular stillness that belongs only to the early morning and to grief. She always would. But she added something beside it. A drawing, crayon on white paper, slightly crumpled at the edges from being carried in a small boy's coat pocket. A family portrait where everyone was too tall and the house behind them floated just slightly off the ground, as though the whole thing might lift away somewhere better at any moment. Finn had given it to her the morning after the clan assembly, pressing it into her hands with the gravity of an 8-year-old delivering something important. Something he had decided mattered. "That's you," he said, pointing to one of the tall figures, right in the middle. "I put you in the middle." She had looked at it for a long moment before she could speak. Something in her throat doing something she hadn't planned for. Now it stood beside Daniel's photograph. 2 pieces of paper. One representing everything she had lost. One representing everything. Carefully, tentatively, one day at a time, beginning to grow back in its place. Not replacing, never replacing, just adding, the way a family does. Not by subtraction, but by addition. By making room. That, she was learning, was what moving forward actually looked like. Not forgetting, not replacing, just making room. He came to the apartment on Tuesday evenings, not for any grand reason, no occasion, no appointment. Evelyn made dinner on Tuesdays, slow-cooked, warm. The kind that fills a small apartment with smell and the particular comfort of someone choosing to cook for you. Not because they have to, because they want to. Because you are worth the time it takes. And she had. With quiet decisiveness and without ceremony. Added a 4th chair to the table. Just pulled it up one Tuesday and set a place, and that was that. He sat in it stiffly the first time. Like someone who wasn't sure the floor would hold. Like he expected to be asked to leave. More comfortably the second time. By the 4th Tuesday. He was helping Finn with homework at the kitchen counter. Patient in a way that surprised Lila every time she watched it. While Evelyn painted near the window in the good light. And Lila read in the armchair by the lamp. And the apartment held all 4 of them without effort, without strain. Like it had always had room for exactly this. "Is this what it's supposed to feel like?" he asked once, very quietly, when they were washing up after dinner, side by side at the sink. Finn snoring softly on the sofa behind them. The sound of Evelyn humming faintly from her studio. What? Ordinary. Like nothing is about to be taken away. Lila considered that. The word ordinary. The way he said it. Like it was a country he had heard about but never visited. Like it was a language he was only now beginning to learn. "I think so," she said. "I think ordinary is what people mean when they say they want peace. They don't mean quiet. They mean nothing is about to be taken." He looked at the water in the sink for a moment. Then, "I wouldn't have known. I never had a Tuesday." She handed him a dish towel. "You have them now," she said. He took the towel and didn't say anything for a moment. But his shoulders, which she had watched carry centuries of tension like weather, settled. Just slightly. Just enough. On a Friday evening in late November. They walked, just walked. No destination, no purpose. Through the lit streets of Manhattan, neon reflecting on wet pavement, the city doing what it always did. Enormous and indifferent, and somehow, on this particular night, exactly right. Luciana had his hands in his coat pockets. Lila had her scarf pulled to her chin. Their breath made small clouds in the cold air, neither of them in a hurry, for once. They stopped at a corner under a streetlight that turned everything amber. That particular warm gold that makes even November look like something worth staying in. He looked at her. The same steadiness he had shown when he brought his foot down on those vials. Fully prepared for whatever came next. And then he kissed her. Softly. Once. Like a question he already knew the answer to, but wanted to ask properly. She felt the cold of him and the warmth of herself. The contrast of it. Two things that shouldn't have fit together, fitting together anyway. The quiet rightness of that. When she pulled back, she was smiling. The kind you can't plan. The kind that just happens. Still ice cold, she said. Still warm enough for both of us, he said. And there was something in his voice she hadn't heard there before. Something unguarded, undefended. Like a room with the windows finally open. Happy, he sounded. Just then, in that amber light on a wet corner in late November. Genuinely, simply, happy. His phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. Something shifted briefly across his face. The old steel returning. Quick, practiced. Then he put the phone away and looked at her directly. Nothing hidden in it. The Bloodthorn clan, he said quietly. They've confirmed your bloodline. They know about the eternal blood. The amber light fell across his face, his eyes steady on hers. I want you to know, he said, so you choose with clear eyes, not because you didn't see this coming, but because you had the full picture and chose anyway. Lila looked at him for a long moment. She thought of Daniel, of a kitchen floor and a last whispered warning, and 2 years of carrying grief like a wall she had built herself, brick by brick, to keep everything out, including everything worth letting in. She thought of Finn's drawing in the window, of Theo in the garden, choosing friendship with clear eyes, and losing something smaller to keep something truer. Of her mother, painting the world she couldn't say aloud, keeping knowledge safe in oil and canvas until her daughter was ready to hold it. She thought of a poor girl who walked through iron gates one October morning, just trying to survive, and without meaning to, without planning it, without anything but a worn canvas bag and her brother's voice still in her chest, found the most dangerous vampire king in the city, and found herself. She took his hand, ice cold against her warmth. I chose with clear eyes 3 weeks ago, she said, on a garden bench in the dark. I'm not unchoosing. He held her hand carefully, the way you hold something fragile. Except she wasn't fragile. They both knew that. He held it carefully because he finally understood its value. Above them. The city went on being everything at once. Indifferent. Luminous. Enormous. Entirely unaware of the two of them standing there under a streetlight, choosing each other. In the cold. On a Friday. For no audience at all. And she finally understood. Standing on that lit corner in November, cold hand in warm, that healing was never going to be a single moment. A threshold crossed. A door closed behind her. It was going to be 1,000 Tuesday evenings. A crayon drawing placed beside a photograph. A fourth chair pulled up without ceremony. A hand held carefully in the dark by someone learning. For the first time in centuries, what it felt like to stay somewhere long enough to call it home. Her brother had tried to warn her away from exactly this kind of risk. She understood now that the truest way to honor him was not to stay safe. It was to stay open. This story reminds us that the quiet heroism most of us practice every day, setting an extra place at the table, keeping a photograph in the afternoon light, making room. One small, ordinary decision at a time. For someone who has never known what ordinary feels like, is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole thing. If you have ever lost someone and found yourself still talking to their photograph in the morning before you face the world, you already know what Lila knows. Grief does not ask for grand gestures. It asks for Tuesday evenings, for the familiar mug left in its usual spot, for saying a name out loud in an empty room. Because love does not need an audience to be real. And if you have ever pulled a chair up to the table for someone unexpected, someone who arrived sideways and changed everything without asking permission, you know exactly how much courage that quietly takes. Not the motorcycle at full speed kind of courage, the kind that costs more. That is the courage this story is truly about. Lila placed a child's crayon drawing beside her brother's photograph and made room for both. Is there someone in your life, still here or no longer, whose memory you keep in the light every day? You don't have to say who. Just drop a heart below if you know exactly what I mean. This vampire tale was born from a real human soul, full of emotion, contradiction, and longing. I was merely a companion who helped arrange the words to be as beautiful and clear as possible. That's why you'll find it not only terrifying, but also very human.